On this episode of This Week in Linux, we have a lot of distro news to cover with Debian, Fedora, Red Hat, Deepin, Farron OS, Netrunner, Parrot Security, and more. We'll check out some app news for a couple financial apps from KDE, KMyMoney, and Scrooge. ULauncher, a new application launcher tool, has been announced, and some new services have been launched from Purism and Tutanota. Later in the show, we'll cover a Firefox blunder and some Linux gaming news. All that and much more coming up. I'm Michael Tunnell with Tux Digital, and this is your weekly source for Linux good news. Before we get started with this week's episode, I want to take a second to talk about a new platform that I wanted to try, and that is Sponsys, or Sponsus. Sponsys is a platform that is an alternative to Patreon. So if you're not aware, Patreon and Sponsys are platforms that allow you to monthly donate to the Tux Digital channel as well as this podcast, and that allows me to spend more time and devote more time to developing more content, making new videos, making new podcast episodes, and everything like that. But at the same time, you also get perks and rewards for doing so. So when you donate, you also get benefits of having unedited episodes, being able to join patron-only Discord servers, being able to join this show during the recording, during the live stream that is only exclusive to text chat for non-patrons. But if you're a patron, regardless of what platform, you can join the Discord server and join me on the show, and we can have a conversation during the stream, that kind of thing. So there's many perks that are available for people who are patrons. But Sponsys is an alternative that I wanted to try because it's pretty new. It's only been around for maybe less than a month or so, because it was created for the purpose of combating and competing with Patreon. And the reason is because Patreon has had some issues with some censoring and some deplatforming of people, and there's a lot of the community don't really like a lot of the YouTube community, a lot of the creator community don't really like Patreon. So their Sponsys was one of those people and decided, I'm going to make my own. But at the same time, they were like, well, I want to make my own and I'll just share it with everybody else too, because, why not? So they did make their own, and they decided to let people to sign up and, use their platform as an alternative. And that's why I wanted to try it out to see how well it worked, and to see if it could do what I hope it could do. Now, we're not getting rid of Patreon right now because Patreon is a platform that people are already using, and I don't want to just, make a big mess and move everybody over to Sponsys until I know for a fact that it's a platform that can support it. However, there's also some other reasons why I don't want to get rid of Patreon, and one of the bigger reasons is you'll see in the video of this episode the Sponsys page, and the Sponsys page has a minimum tier of $3 a month. And the reason for that is not because I'm greedy. Whatever you can give me is amazing, and I appreciate it. It doesn't matter. I appreciate it very much. I can't really explain how much I appreciate people who are willing to contribute to the channel. But the amount of fees that are the way the structure of fees in Sponsys makes it not practical to do $1 a month. So let me explain. Patreon has a $1 a month option because they do this transactional pooling system. So essentially, everybody pledges to donate a certain amount, and then all of that money is collected at once, and the transaction fee is applied to the collective total. So that 10% to 12% is not as much on individual transactions. It's on the whole pool, which the Sponsys platform does individual transactions, which makes it a lot more complicated. Because in order to do that, they have to have a transaction or processing company, and the company they chose is Stripe. Now, I am a big fan of Stripe. I've used it in many websites that I've built. It is very powerful and it's very nice, and it's their fees are reasonable, but at the same time, their fees are high if you are getting $1 in that transaction. So, because they're not doing a pooling system, they're doing each individual pledge or individual contribution donation is applied to a transaction fee. The transaction fee becomes a lot higher. So The platform fee is actually only 7% for sponsors, which is much lower than the 10 to 12%, which fluctuates for some reason for Patreon. But at the same time, there's also a little bit of an asterisk that kind of makes it a little bit more expensive of transaction fee. And that is, Stripe has this process, the same thing that happens at PayPal as well. You have a 2.9% fee plus 30 cents. So if you only do $1, you're actually tacking on that 30 cents to that dollar, turning it into, instead of 7% to, or 2.9%, it becomes 32.9% or 37%. So it's just not practical to offer a $1 patronage in sponsors because of the way that Stripe does their transaction fees. So that is a very long-winded version of explaining why there's a $3 minimum on sponsors. But if you would like to have an alternative to Patreon, so far I think this is the best possible option that we could use. So I wanted to try it out. And if you would like to try it out with me, I would very much appreciate it. And yeah, so anyway, and also people who are already patrons, thank you very much. It's amazing. I can't really express my gratitude to the full extent because I don't think there are words for it. But anyway, let's get to the show. Up first in the show this week is Debian news. We actually have a lot of Debian news. And we're going to start off with Debian 9.9. So Debian 9.9 introduces 120 security updates and bug fixes. Now, this is actually a stable release, but because it's a 9.9, it's pretty close to the next version of Debian, and that is Debian 10. So Debian 10 they're already in feature freeze for the release of Debian 10, but they haven't really given an announcement for when that's going to happen. It'll probably happen fairly soon, definitely within the year, like within 2019, and I suspect somewhere between a month to maybe 2 months or so. Somewhere around there is when it'll probably happen. But we don't have a schedule right now because Debian never provides a release date. They just decide it's ready and then they release it. So that's what happens. But Debian 10 has a lot of cool stuff coming. So first of all, they have a new theme and wallpaper design, which is nice. It's a very nice looking blue design that's in it. They have a new updated version of GNOME Desktop, which is 3.30. Now, it's not the latest version of the GNOME with 3.32, but to be fair, Debian rarely publishes the latest version of anything in their stable releases. So that's not really surprising. They do have a fairly up-to-date kernel, though, with 4.19. It's not the latest one, that's at all, but it's fairly up-to-date. And OpenJDK is at 11.0. That's also not up-to-date, but whatever. AppArmor will actually be enabled by default in the newest version of Debian 10, which is very interesting because that also makes it possible for snap packages to easily be set up for Debian without doing much effort because AppArmor would already be available. They've also decided to replace IP tables with NF tables, which is pretty cool because NF tables is a lot more user-friendly than IP tables by a ton, really. I mean, it's still a complicated structure, but not as bad as IP tables. They've also done a lot of improvements to support for more ARM64 and ARM HF boards. They've also decided to remove Python 2 support and just stick with Python 3, which is great because Python 2 has been deprecated for a while. They've updated their Bash support for Bash 5.0, and they've introduced Secure Boot support. Additionally, the last thing I want to talk about, the latest version of Debian Buster, is that they are making a new live installer. Now, they're still going to have, I'm pretty sure, they're still going to have the old installer if you would want to use it, but they're now going to introduce Calamares as an option for the live installer with the Debian Live images. So that's pretty cool. And finally, let's talk about the new project leader for Debian, and that is Sam Hartman. His tagline for trying to become his candidacy for becoming project leader was "Keep Debian Fun," which is an interesting tagline because it's fun is not the first word that comes to mind when I think about Debian. But anyway, so He said, as a project leader, he says he wants to promote listening and disagreements without escalation, and coming to important project decisions more timely, including through proposing general resolutions where appropriate. So there's a huge amount of things that, and if you want, I'll have a link to the his candidacy request or resume. I don't know what to call it. That he submitted for becoming the project leader, if you're interested in learning more about what his plans are and things. But it's interesting because it's like he wanted to make Debian, I think it's better to say make it fun again or whatever, because Debian is not known for having the most fun environment, and it's also like very strict and structured. So we'll see what happens there, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing what happens with them having a new project leader, because if his goals are to streamline processes and things, I think Debian does need to streamline quite a bit of stuff, because not necessarily because they have old packages, but because when I've tried to contribute to Debian, you learn very quickly that it's a bit of a task. So if they were to make that a better experience, that would be awesome. So anyway, if you'd like to learn more about Debian 9.9, the new Debian 10 features, or learn about the new project leader, then I'll have a link to all of that in the show notes. Up next in the show is another distro news release, is Fedora 30. So Fedora 30 has been released with both the workstation and the server versions. There's a lot of changes in this version, but we're not going to cover everything. We're just going to talk about the notable things. Like, for example, Linux kernel 5.0 is included. Mesa drivers 19 are included. GNOME 3.32, and a bunch of other package upgrades, including some programming languages like Ruby, PHP. There's also scripting with Bash and many more libraries like glibc and so on. There's also, so they're talking about one of the things that a lot of people have been bothered by Fedora in the past is that when you boot your system, there's some weird flickers happening. And they've said that in Fedora 30 that they are now having a flicker-free boot, which is really good. They've also changed the default format for crypt setup, for the encryption setup or encrypt setup, to use metadata format for LUKS2. They've also enabled the dbus broker service to use dbus broker as a system and session message bus backend. But let's get into the thing that I think is the most interesting, and that is they are offering two new, actually, I'm not sure if might be three new, but Anyway, there are some more spins or desktop options in Fedora 30. I don't know if LXQt was in it before or not, so that's the one I'm thinking. I'm not sure if it's 2 or 3, but LXQt 0.14 will be included in Fedora, and they're also including an option for Deepin Desktop and Pantheon Desktop. If you're not aware, Deepin is from the Deepin Linux project, and Pantheon is from the Elementary OS project. So this is interesting because they are offering some more approaches to having these DEs in the spins. These are actually official versions, not just like community spins. So it's pretty cool that they're doing this because Fedora for a long time is just using the main staple options, and it's pretty cool to see that they're adding some extras for that. So if you'd like to learn more about Fedora, you can check out the link in the show notes for Fedora 30. You can also check out the episode previously we talked about GNOME 3.32, where we talk about like what's different in that particular version, which applies to Fedora 30 here. I'll have a link to that for that episode in the show notes below as well, so check that out if you'd like to. And let's move on to the next topic. Up next in the show is Red Hat. They've actually announced a new brand and logo for their company. So the Red Hat new logo is very similar to the old one, but more modern and flat design, or it's just a better overall approach. Some people might not agree with that. They might like the older version that had like the Shadow Man in it, and some people do like it. I think it's a better option because it's much more modern, because they haven't actually changed the logo in since 1997 or something, and it definitely showed. You could tell it was a pretty old logo. So it's good that they did decide to rebrand it overall, like make a new logo, but they didn't change too much. So it's still basically a red fedora, or I guess a red Homburg maybe. I'm not really sure how they describe it, which kind of hat it is. Anyway, it's pretty good because I think it's a nice design. Definitely the more modern approach is better now these days. Of course, they also capitalized the letters in Red Hat and they separated them, showing that the company's name is Red Hat, not Red Hat or whatever, because they used to have a small lowercase all bunched together, and every time someone described it as not as based on the logo, they didn't really like it. So it was like, you definitely need to update your branding if you have a problem with your own logo. So I'm happy that they're doing it, and I think it's a better approach. I think it looks much better than the previous Shadow Man icon. I mean, the Shadow Man thing was good for a while, but it's been 1997. It's been long enough. So anyway, additional to that, they also announced that they are taking over the work to maintain OpenJDK, or Java, to help breathe new life into Java. So OpenJDK is the community-ran Java development kit, and Oracle has essentially abandoned Java. Like, they still sort of work on it, and they don't promote their own Java version. They don't promote Oracle JDK anymore. They promote OpenJDK, so they can not have as much work on it, I suppose. And more than most people would be like, well, isn't this great? Because they're handing off the control to the community and they're embracing the community. Like, well, no, they're just kind of like giving it over, but they're not really embracing the community, because what they're doing is what they typically do for any of their software that they don't want to work on anymore and they think that they're losing money on. They just abandon it. So that's pretty much what happened with OpenOffice and LibreOffice. So OpenOffice, Oracle decided to, ruin, and everybody who worked on OpenOffice decided to leave and create LibreOffice. And then Oracle abandoned OpenOffice, and then Apache picked it up. So I don't consider this really that of a good thing from Oracle's side, but it's really cool that Red Hat is taking the reins of maintaining both OpenJDK 8 and 11. The current version is 12. But it's great because there's backwards compatibility or existing like long-term support options are necessary for people who build on Java. So that part is good. So good on Red Hat for doing that. And so if you'd like to learn more about the reason why they changed the branding, or the branding contest they were doing, if you learn more about that, or if you want to learn more about OpenJDK, I'll have a link to both of those in the show notes below. Up next in the show is some somewhat negative news, but actually kind of a good news in disguise. So the bad news is that Scientific Linux has decided to end development. So Fermilab, not sure, they maintain Scientific Linux and have done so for quite a long time. But unfortunately, they've decided to no longer maintain it and discontinue the distribution. They will still continue to develop what exists right now, and they will still maintain it and provide like security updates and that kind of thing for people who are currently using it. So it's not like they're just dropping it completely. They're not Oracle. So if you are using it, you can continue to use it for the lifetime of the long-term support, or the support term that they have announced. But in the future, they're not going to do any more Scientific Linux releases. They're going to be switching their development to focusing on CentOS as the base, and then create their scientific computing environments and set that on top of CentOS. So that's actually pretty cool, because they're making it possible to use CentOS as the base rather than just use Scientific Linux, which also offers a collaborative approach to other institutions or other companies to work in tandem with Scientific Linux. Maybe they wanted to use CentOS and they couldn't get those tools on there, which made it more awkward, so they couldn't do the collaboration. Now it makes it possible to do so, which is very cool. Now you might be wondering, why does Scientific Linux why does that exist and CentOS exist? Why are they doing it now? Why are they switching now? Well, CentOS and Scientific Linux are both based on Red Hat, or based on the Red Hat source, and they build their own distro. And at the time, CentOS didn't exist. So Scientific Linux created their own distro based on Red Hat because they wanted to use Red Hat but didn't want to pay for the services of they didn't need the support of Red Hat, essentially. So they decided to take the source and build out their own distro and use it that way and build their tools on top of it. What's interesting is that I think it's a very small amount of time. I'm pretty sure it's like 4 days or something from when Scientific Linux started to when CentOS started. So that's just a nice little bit of information. So it's pretty cool because they're doing the whole collaboration thing. But I think it's really, really cool is that they've recognized that using a different base to build their tools on top of it makes it possible for other people to benefit from their stuff even more so, and allows them to benefit from the development of other people who might want to use their tools as well. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more about this, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. So I'll have a link to the announcement from Scientific Linux, when their announcement to end it. But overall, I think this is really good news for the community and really good news for people who want to use these tools and or use CentOS already, that kind of thing. So yeah, sounds bad, but actually pretty good. So cool. So to go from some news that sounds bad but isn't bad to some news that sounds bad and is totally bad. Not horrible, but definitely a mistake, a blunder, if you will. So Firefox had some issues with their add-ons over the weekend, and it's because there was an expired certificate. The thing that you could you use for secure transactions, not transaction like money, but secure connections over the internet that you can automate. And they didn't, or whatever. I don't know why, but essentially what happened was the certificate expired and created an invalid signature structure for all of their, basically every add-on in the add-on store. Not everything. Mozilla's add-ons website it wasn't 100% affected. I had I think I had like 2 extensions that weren't hurt by it or weren't affected by it, but overall, majority of them were. And including like Grease Monkey, Ghostery, NoScript, uBlock Origin, and many more. So yeah, that's not good. Mozilla developers definitely scrambled really quickly to address the issue. They actually patched the problem through the Shield service or the Firefox Studies program thing. So you could install the fix and then also disable the Studies thing or disable the Shield service. Once you got the fix implemented. So you had to either do one of two things. Do a workaround that you go into the about config and change a particular Boolean value from true to false. Or you could go into the Shield service, implement a patch, and then be, good to go. So that's not, it's okay that they, no, it's not okay. It's not bad in the sense of like catastrophic problem. It was very annoying, and it hit people at different times. Like it took till like 2 or 3 days after it started for it to hit me, and when it did, it totally messed up most of my add-ons, and I had to go through the fix process. But the fixes were already out at the time, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But overall, it's definitely an issue. So I don't want to pretend that it's not a problem, even though I am a Firefox fan. It is definitely a problem that there was no reason for this to happen. All you have to do is, renew your certificate. And hopefully they learned their lesson from this and make sure that they have it ready to go or have it reinstated or a new one or whatever. Automate the process. I don't know. There should be many ways to do it. I mean, automating is possible, so whatever. I hope this doesn't happen again because this was not very good. Not a very. Some people were like deciding to move over to Chrome, which was weird because if you're using Firefox, you're probably using it for a reason that makes no reason to use Chrome. But who knows? Anyway, I still think Firefox is a fantastic browser, even if they screw up sometimes, which they do. Of course, everybody screws up, but I still think Firefox is a fantastic browser. The container tabs structure is awesome. It's probably the best feature of any browser in existence. And if you've never tried that, you need to check it out. I'm making a video on the container tabs as we speak. Okay, not as we speak, because as I speak, I'm making this show, but I am making the channel, making a video for the channel of container tabs. So, anyway, if you want to learn more about this, or if you were affected and you want to get and you haven't been able to fix it yet, I'll have a link to the explanation to how to fix it in the show notes below. Up next in the show, Purism has announced that their launch of the Librem One bundle of ethical services and software. So this is interesting because this is a software that is released to kind of combat the exploitative nature of companies like Facebook and Google, where they sell your data and collect as much information about you as they can. This is more of a services that you can sign up for and use them without worrying about your privacy being violated. So they promise to have no ads, no tracking, and they will respect you by never selling or sharing anything from whatever you do on their services. For messages, for instance, they have 3 options. There's public, private, and temporary. You can also, if you want to cancel your account, all data and the account name will be deleted forever. So if you decide to completely leave from the thing, they don't keep anything after the fact. They just delete it all. It's also encrypted, so they have no access to it when you are using it. That's the whole point of like the no tracking and everything. This is a paid service. Will cost about $8 a month or $7.99, whatever. Or you can get a cheaper option by doing it over, like you're paying for a year. Now, the interesting thing is it's currently limited right now. So they've said that they're going to be releasing a lot more applications and services, but they currently only have, I think, 4 right now. And so I think that's kind of weird that they launched it before really having everything ready, but okay. They also are going to do a family plan of $14 a month. So you have $8 a month for one person or $14 a month for 5 people. So that's a cool approach because they're making it more practical for people who are doing it in a group. I like that. But they also have another option where you can do a free version. So you can not pay anything and get access to the chat and the social services. The chat is actually based on Matrix. So you'd basically join a Matrix room and have discussions and stuff, or you could do Librem Social and you'd basically be using Mastodon. So it's pretty cool because I like the idea of this. I don't know if the execution is there yet because they still have a lot of things that are not available yet. Like they talk about they're going to be adding a files structure or backup options or contacts and stuff like that, which is kind of like implementing Nextcloud all together in this service, which has potential. Like once that's all there, it does have potential. But at the same time, there's been a little bit of controversy, not a ton, not like a huge amount, but some people have been annoyed by the fact that in the initial launch, all these applications were talked about as being, Librem applications and Librem services, but they were rebranded versions of existing open source tools. And this has bothered people, some people. I think it's kind of okay depending on, because as long as they're respecting the license of those tools, it's okay if you rebrand. Actually, that's part of the license that you can. So that's not a big deal to me. But overall, they've actually come out and responded to this criticism, saying that the reason why they're doing it is because they wanted to provide an alternative to people who don't want to use G Suite or those kinds of things like Dropbox and eventually Dropbox, but those kinds of setups but they do want to still have one particular company that they go to have everything set up for them. They don't want to self-host it. They don't want to have to manage everything. They just wanted to go to one place, get all the stuff that they were leaving, and use it all, for a reasonable price. And this does seem to fit that vibe. Now, right now, the $8 a month, it depends on how long it takes to get the backup stuff and to get the file stuff and the contacts and all that stuff. Because you might be paying, when those come out, you'll be paying the same price to get everything. Whereas until they get out, you're paying more to get less. So it's just a weird decision to release it without having everything ready. But hey, there are some cool things that they have released so far. So they have chat with Matrix, social based on Mastodon, LibreMail, which is an end-to-end encryption structure, kind of like Proton Mail, and it uses the K9 Mail Android app, which is LibreMail, but it's based on K9. And they also have Librem Tunnel, the VPN service, and I'm pretty sure it's using private internet access to power it, because they did also announce their partnership with private internet access a little while back that we covered on this show, actually. So it's interesting that they're doing this, and I think there's a lot of potential for this as a service. I do wish them the best, and I hope that they are successful with it, because I do think that having a company that you could point to and say, hey, you're using G Suite and everything, but this might be a better option for you because they respect your privacy and everything. So if you're a company that's really important, here's an option for you and that kind of thing. So I think this is great, but it's still a little bit of a iffy thing with the whole stuff not being ready and, that kind of stuff. I don't know. Also, there's only 2 gigs of storage for the LibreMail, which is not small, but not big. Most services are like a minimum of 3 gigs, and ProtonMail is 5 gigs to start with for the premium, like the low premium. But it's okay. I just wish they would, try to provide some more options. At least, give you an option to pay more and to get more gigs. But they did say that they're planning to do that at some point, but we don't know when. So anyway, I'm glad that they're doing it. I think the idea is fantastic. I just wish they'd have wait a little bit longer until everything was ready, because it feels kind of interesting that Purism is doing all this stuff at once, and some of these things kind of like feel like they have a ton of potential, but they're not quite there yet. And anyway, I wish them well, and I hope that this is a success, because this idea is fantastic, and I think it does need to exist. So yeah. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more about this, I'll have a link to it in the show notes, as well as the link to the Destination Linux episode that we talked about this particular topic, as well as many more for the next coming episode. Okay, technically it's not out right now, so I won't have the link right now, but when the episode does come out, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. But yeah, it'll be episode 120 of Destination Linux. And it was a very interesting conversation we had about this, because we had like devil's advocates, discussion, as well as like pros and cons for this particular thing. I think it's definitely worth checking out. So, check that out in this description, or just go to destinationlinux.org to find out the episode when it comes out. So, yeah. Let's go to the next topic. The company Tutanota has launched a new encrypted contact form tool for websites. It's called Secure Connect. And if you've never heard of Tutanota, we talked about it in a previous episode, but Tutanota is a competitor to ProtonMail in that they are an email service that is a pro or premium email service that is very structured, focused on encryption, privacy, and security, and everything like that. So like it's basically the same thing as like ProtonMail, but it's a different company. So I think this is really cool, because they are doing this this service that is for the purpose of creating a contact form. And this form, by the way, is open source. The structure is open source, encrypted communication tool. So it allows people to communicate with representative of a website securely and anonymously. So for example, let's say you are a journalist and a whistleblower wanted to contact you. If you had a basic form on your website, it's not really secure, and it's definitely not encrypted, and there's potential for people to intercept that data. So a whistleblower might not want to send you any information because of that. This tool is claiming to be able to offer an encrypted channel for a secure and confidential communication with anyone directly on their website. And specifically to support press freedom, they're doing this for free for news sites, so that whistleblowers can get in touch with journalists securely, and knowing for a fact that the stuff that they send is only going to the person they want it to go to, and they don't actually have to give their name up front about it. So they say all data is entered into the contact form is automatically encrypted end-to-end before it is sent to the mailbox of the website owner. Even files can be dropped into the form, which are then encrypted automatically. So they also point, and in their blog post or the announcement, they also point out that some websites track IP addresses when you visit a website, which is true. That happens all the time. They said that if you wanted to use Secure Connect anonymously, like a whistleblower might want to, they could use the website or access the website via Tor browser, making it a completely anonymous, direct communication with that person. So it's a really cool idea, and I think this is it's surprising it took so long for this to exist, but I'm happy to see it now because this would maybe change the freedom of the press to the point where people are more willing to give information that they would want to, but are worried that it might get some backlash on it. So anyway, that's pretty cool, and I applaud Tutanota for making such a tool and also doing it for free for websites like news sites and journalists and things. So yeah, if you have to learn more about this or Tutanota in general, I have a link to it in the show notes below, as well as an episode that we talked about Tutanota in the past if you'd like to learn more about their services. Up next in the show, we're going to move on to some distro news, or back to distro news, really. And that's first up, we're going to have Deepin 15.10. So Deepin 15.10 was released, and they're doing something pretty interesting because they're switching from their existing Debian testing style of 15.9 to using Debian stable rather than the testing version. So it's not going to be like rolling anymore. It's going to be a long-term support approach instead. So Deepin said this in their announcement. Deepin 15.10 is newly built and released using Debian stable repository. In this way, system stability and security is greatly improved, bringing users more stable and efficient experiences. End quote. So this is interesting because they're using, switching from, it's not really technically a downgrade. Some people have described it as a downgrade, but it's more of a switching of philosophies of having a stable versus rolling. So, if that's what they want to do, cool. There's also some stuff that they're doing that's kind of interesting in the sense that they had this new auto merge option in their desktop context menu, which means that if you put files on the desktop, it will automatically group them into different folders for videos, music, pictures, documents, applications, and other stuff. So it kind of automatically organizes your files on your desktop. So that's pretty interesting. I assume by file format and that kind of thing. So that's pretty cool. It's an interesting idea because a lot of the time people who use a desktop, it's very cluttered and random stuff here and there. And it's an interesting approach because I think that's some people might really enjoy just having it automatically done for them. They also done a lot of improvements for the performance and bug fixes and all that kind of stuff. But I think the most interesting thing that they're doing in this particular version of 15.10 is that they're replacing their window manager. So Deepin desktop environment is the desktop environment they created for their distribution, and it's known as probably one of the prettiest desktop environments available for Linux. It's definitely in the top 3 for sure. But there's always been an issue with their system kind of being clunky, like a little off. There's some things that it has a nice polish, but the functioning back end is kind of missing something. And I think that they've basically acknowledged that and have decided to drop using their own window manager, their custom window manager, and are replacing that with Kwin of all things. So this is very interesting to me, anyway. They say that using Kwin makes it it's because it occupies less memory and has better performance, providing smoother user experiences. So this, to me, is very interesting because I want to see how the usage of Kwin works out for them, and I wonder what other distros who ship Deepin desktop environment will do with this change and whether they'll implement this approach. Because I think that the main issue with Deepin is that it looks really good, but it's pretty clunky as well. And kind of a big issue with Kwin is that it's very, very polished functionally, but not that great in the appearance structure. So, Breeze is a great theme. I'm not saying that that's not, but there are some things that it's not really well polished. It's kind of, there's so many different things that it can do, and it's so, the controls are scattered here and there. I'm curious what's going to happen because of the approach that Deepin takes with their polish and their attention to detail as far as design, using Kwin as their back end to do it. That could be a really great combination. So I look forward to checking that out when they have it ready. It's the first release, so it is technically ready. But I'm saying like they probably haven't had a lot of time to develop that polish for it. But I'm checking to see. I'm very curious to see what ends up with this, because this has a ton of potential to both have a great back end and a great front end and all that. So it'd be really cool to see what happens with this, and also what happens with other distros if they're going to ship Deepin like that, or the Deepin desktop environment, and how that works out there too. So anyway, if you'd like to learn more about this, I'll have a link to the release notes for Deepin 15.10 in the show notes. Up next in the show is an update for 4.6 of Parrot Security. So Parrot Security is it's kind of like Kali Linux. It is a penetration testing distribution. And this latest release is actually like a point release, but it's changing quite a lot and adding a lot of cool features. So they've actually added OpenNIC support in a non-serve to let users switch from the system DNS servers to using the OpenNIC DNS resolvers. So that's interesting, as well as having better OpenVPN support. They're also enforcing HTTPS on apt now, the apt package tool. This is interesting because apt doesn't really require HTTP by default. So because some repositories don't, we've talked about it in the previous episode before, but some repositories don't, use HTTPS, and therefore they would break in certain mirrors and that kind of thing. So that's why. But this is cool because they have the option by default to use HTTPS, and if it doesn't have HTTPS, it does a downgrade for apt in order to use the other version. So that's an interesting approach to it. And but another thing that I like about this latest release is, they've added KDE Plasma as a version or desktop version for their distro. So they already had the existing version. They were using Mate, and that's a great desktop environment as well. But I tend to prefer KDE Plasma, so I think this is pretty cool to have a penetration testing distro that has Plasma as a DE. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool, and I like to see what happens for Parrot Security as far as how they implemented Plasma, because Parrot Security is actually a very interesting thing, because most of the time these types of distributions that are hacking or penetration testing don't really care about the appearance of the system. They only care about the function, which is understandable because it's a purposefully made distribution. However, Parrot Security goes beyond that and also does make a really nice looking interface for their system. So I'm looking forward to trying out Parrot 4.6 to see how they implemented Plasma, because I'm just curious what they did. They also did some better support for snap package confinement as well for this release, so it makes it better for snap packages to run inside of Parrot. So that's pretty cool. So if you'd like to learn more about Parrot Security or this particular release, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. Up next in the show is actually a friend of the show. Farron OS developers released the Farron OS April 2019 snapshot. And this is actually pretty cool because they've done some interesting things for their installer. They have this out-of-the-box experience, or the OOBE structure for the latest release of Farron. And this is where you can choose the codecs and the layout, and whether you use a light and dark mode or having a custom accent color, choosing whether animations are toggled on and off, and that kind of thing in the installer before you actually install the system. So that is a pretty cool idea. So you get to be able to customize it before you even install it. So that's cool. They've also updated and modified their the theming for the GTK2 and GTK3 structure so that it blends better with the darkened theme, as well as overall improvements to the theming for Farron OS in general, so make it more cohesive and everything like that. They've also updated the window borders to make it so the title bars are consistent with the new theme, just putting a lot of effort into making it consistent with overall all the new changes that they've done. So this is pretty cool. They've also decided to do some improvements to their welcome screen. I'll have a link to the full blog post about this so you can find out everything that they did, because there's quite a bit. But one of the things I was interested in it was that they have implemented the KDE Neon User Edition repositories. They put that into the mirrored into their repositories for Neon Bionic, so you can have the repositories of Neon, allowing you to have packages like basically the latest and greatest KDE packages inside of Farron OS, which is pretty cool. Because Farron OS right now is based on Cinnamon. I think they're working on a KDE Plasma version as well, but their main version is Cinnamon. So having all the different latest and greatest packages from KDE via the KDE Neon User Edition repository is a pretty interesting approach to it, because you kind of get like the best of both if you whether you use GTK or Qt or whatever. That's an interesting idea. And there's also a lot of cool custom. If you never used Farron OS, there's a lot of interesting approaches, like ideas that he's done in their development, because there's like a lot of customizations for design, the way it works and feels, like the workflow of it. Overall it's pretty cool that the amount of work he's done over a fairly short period of time as well. So if you're curious about checking out Farron OS, I'll have a link to the April 2019 snapshot blog post in the show notes below. To round out the distro news this week, we have Netrunner. Netrunner April 2019 release has come out, and this comes with a new look and feel featuring dark theme powered by Kvantum theme engine, which is a more modern 3D looking design with some transparency and stuff like that. So what's interesting is, if you've never heard of Netrunner, Netrunner is pretty cool because they create multiple options, both a stable version and a rolling version. So by that I mean that the distro is based on different distributions as the core base, like the core structure. So the stable version is based on Debian. They have both a Debian testing and a Debian stable option, because it's Netrunner Core, I think is what they call it. But they also have another version where it's the Netrunner Rolling, and that's based on Manjaro. So it's like a Arch-ish kind of approach, but it's not really Arch, because Manjaro is not really Arch either. That's their own separate thing, but it's the same approach with the same tooling and that kind of thing. So it's pretty interesting. If you haven't checked it out, it's definitely worth trying, at least to try out both, like to see the experience between having the Manjaro version and the Debian version. That's pretty cool. They've also improved it where they have a light glow that will appear on when you user activate the minimize all windows to show desktop type thing. So they're putting a nice bit of polish on it. And if you never heard of Netrunner, another thing that's noting is that Netrunner is made by the Blue Systems company, and Blue Systems is very much a heavy backer of the KDE community. In fact, that a lot of employees for Blue Systems actually works on KDE. Like, for example, the people who run KDE Neon are employees of Blue Systems. So Blue Systems is heavily involved in the development of KDE and Plasma and all that stuff. So they have, they've had their own distro, kind of here's a testing ground for things that we want to see happen in Plasma and that kind of thing. So it's a really interesting distro. So if you haven't heard of it and you are interested in Plasma anyway, I do think it's worth giving it a shot, because they do some interesting things. If you've never used Plasma before, I don't know if I would suggest Netrunner exactly, because I think Kubuntu is probably the better first-time user for Plasma. But at the same time, Netrunner is a good option as well. So, yeah. They've also introduced a new category system for their applications menu for web apps. So that's pretty cool. If you wanted to use web apps, they have a structure for that now as well. So anyway, I think Netrunner is worth checking out, especially since they have this new version, has all these different approaches, as well as this new Plasma tweaks section of the system settings that they are doing. So there's a lot of stuff that's being done for Netrunner that's custom, kind of testing ground sort of thing. And if you wanted to try that out and check out what they're doing, I think it's worth doing. So I'll have a link to the Netrunner April 2019 release blog post in the show notes below. Up next in the show is uLauncher. It's called the Ultimate App Launcher. I think is what they use for. And this is an interesting thing because it's a brand new application launcher I've never heard of, but has quite a bit of work built into it. I don't know. It's not brand new. I guess it's brand new to me, so whatever. But uLauncher is pretty cool. because it also has this feature where you can type an application name without worrying about the spelling. So you can just totally butcher the name, put the wrong letters, and it will still try to figure it out. And for the most part, it does pretty well about doing so. So it will also like select the best option. You can just hit enter, and it will open whatever that is selected. Or you could just use your arrow keys up and down to select the one that you would rather have if it didn't get the right one. So it's pretty cool. They also have multiple themes you could use, 4 built-in themes, but as well as also other themes for the community has built that you could use. And you can also create custom color schemes as well. It's a lot of interesting things because it has a lot of functionality. It's got like calculator built into it, application launcher, file searching, that kind of stuff. It's very similar to KRunner, and it's similar to Albert and some other stuff like Synapse. But the difference here is that it's very modern approach. Like it looks very nice. So it's got a better UI than most of the other ones, and it has an extension system. So you can create custom shortcuts and extensions to modify how it works. But you can also install extensions from the extensions marketplace. I guess it's not really marketplace because I'm pretty sure everything's free. But it is like third-party extensions you can get from their website. So you can check that out, and I think it's pretty cool. I've only used it a little bit to kind of test it for this episode, but so far it's pretty interesting. I would definitely say it's worth checking out if you don't have KRunner. Like for Plasma users, we have KRunner, which basically does the same thing, and it's built into the Plasma desktop. So I think that if you don't use Plasma, it's definitely worth checking out because app launchers will change your workflow so much. Like, you have the main menu. You have like the launchers for shortcuts you could do, like Super 1 or the Windows key or logo key, super key, whatever. Windows 1, 2, 3 will launch, and some desktops it will launch like whatever's in your pinned to your taskbar and that kind of thing. Or you can hit the super key and launch the main menu and that kind of thing. But at the same time, the app launchers are so much better. They provide so much more features. You just get used to doing it this way, and once you get used to it, you kind of want to always have one. And so I guess if you want to change your workflow, check out uLauncher. But anyway, it does look really good too. I got to say that. So a lot of these app launchers don't look that good. This one definitely does. So if you are interested in checking out uLauncher, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. Up next in the show is the latest releases for some financial applications created by the KDE community. One has a unfortunate name, not very good name, and the other one has a really good name. And so I think it's good. It's clever, but at the same time unique, I think. So first off, we'll talk about KMyMoney. That's the one that's not a very good name, but it's a very good application and has a lot of cool features. And if you wanted to do both your personal banking and your business banking on your desktop, KMyMoney is a great option for that. Scrooge, I'm pretty sure, is more geared toward the personal financing stuff. But either way, they're both great applications, so there's that. KMyMoney has better integration with online banking services. It has new function to make a new transaction from anywhere inside the app. They've done improvements to the tagging system. There's a lot of performance improvements and bug fixes and all that, so it's really good. And it's pretty complicated to get used to setting up these applications. Even someone who's like very technical, like the financial apps, are just like, okay, you say so. But it's really cool is that they have the online banking stuff, so it can like automatically pull in your transactions from your bank account. So you can automatically do budgeting that way. So rather than having to go and manually type in the expenses reports and stuff like that, it will pull it in for you. So that's awesome. And Scrooge is the other application, Scrooge with a K, which that's cool because it's it's a finance thing. It's based on Ebenezer Scrooge and spelled like with a K because of the KDE thing. I like the name. Okay, I like it. Anyway. This new version has a new feature for a tracker with running balance in the operations page, better performance in the dashboard, and monthly reports, as well as really overall performance in general. And they've also done a lot of bug fixes. I think both of these applications are really good for what they do. And if you are interested in looking for a financial or budgeting application for Linux, then check out KMyMoney or Scrooge in the show notes below. Up next in the show is the latest release of QEMU virtualization system. They have improvements for various architectures like ARM, HPPA, MIPS, PowerPC, RISC-V, x86, and more. There's new options to configure or launch a Spice client GUI with a similar UI to the QEMU GTK, which is very cool. They've also got support for out-of-band command execution for QMP, which can be useful for post-copy migration recovery. And they've improved the tracing and error diagnostics for network block device. This is very cool. QEMU is one of the most powerful virtualization systems for Linux, and if you have never used it before, you definitely need to check it out. It's very good. So QEMU 4.0.0 has been released, and I'll have a link to it in the show notes. So we have some unfortunate news to talk about, and more fortunate for me because I'm a big fan of the game, I guess. For people who don't play the game, they don't really have a reason to care. But Epic Games is at it again. They have acquired Psyonix. For those who are not aware, Psyonix is the maker of Rocket League, which I'm a big fan of and talked about on the show multiple times. Sorry for those who are not interested in that game, but I am, so there it is. Anyway, Epic Games is, at this point, they're notorious for doing horrible things to companies and games and stuff. In the sense of like doing exclusives, purchasing exclusive rights to games so that people who are using Steam can't play them, and all this other nonsense. But this is not just purchasing an exclusive. They have actually purchased Psyonix, the company itself that makes Rocket League. So not only did they purchase the game, they purchased the entire company, which is kind of interesting in a sense of like the history really of Psyonix, because the guy who started Psyonix was a developer for Epic Games. I don't think he worked specifically for Epic Games. Psyonix used to create custom stuff for Unreal Tournament, used to build a variety of different stuff that's like based on Unreal and all that stuff. So it's not like they didn't have a connection in general before this. They really actually had a really deep connection. They worked with Epic a lot of the time for a long time. But at the same time, still disappointed because I don't want Epic to ruin Rocket League, and I don't want Rocket League to no longer have access on Linux and that kind of stuff, because Rocket League is one of those great, fantastic, super popular games that does actually support Linux, so I don't want that to go away. And I really would not be surprised if Epic did do that because, well, they're terrible. So, yeah. Anyway, Rocket League has actually said they've done like an editor's note in their announcement, and they're saying we wanted to clarify something for you after today's news. Rocket League is and will remain available on Steam. Anyone who owns Rocket League through Steam can still play it and look forward to continued support. And there's news that was saying that it's going away from Steam, but Psyonix also said that they are working, that they have plans for the future with Epic. So we don't know exactly what that might entail. There could be some really cool things from it. Like, for example, they could be going free to play, bringing in a whole new audience and a much larger audience. They could use Epic's money to invest in making esports of Rocket League grow exponentially, which would be awesome because get more people involved, get more esports orgs involved, and they could blow up that scene. That would be awesome. But Epic, well, they kind of screwed up their Fortnite esports scene, so who knows what could happen there. Basically, if Epic gives Psyonix money and lets Psyonix just do what they do, that could be amazing. If Epic tries to force things onto them, that could be terrible. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, overall, I'm not excited about this news, but at the same time, I guess it could be worse. They could have already just killed it for Linux anyway. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what to think about it. Who knows what Epic Games is thinking, because the guy who runs Epic has many times made fun of Linux, mocked Linux gamers, and that kind of thing, and has been, contrary to it. Also has been massively hypocritical, talking about how cross-platform is important, and then, ignoring Linux and all that. The Epic Game Store is now available on Linux. Epic, actually, the game store had no plans whatsoever to do a Linux port, but it is available on Linux now because someone else did it. And that group is Lutris. So thank you very much to Lutris for doing this. This is very cool. It makes it possible to show that Epic Game Store can work on Linux, and a lot of the games that are in the store can work on Linux. That's awesome. Well done. But at the same time, I still don't like Epic because they had nothing to do with it. And then, But to give a little bit of credit, very small amount of credit, to the CEO of Epic Games, Tim Sweeney, which I talked about previously, to give him a little bit of credit, when Lutris tweeted that they have now made the Epic Game Store available on Linux, he did reply saying that they should request or to apply for a mega grant or whatever, that Epic has a program that people who can request money to work on things on behalf of Epic. So that's cool, I mean, he could have responded in a much worse way, like, how dare you mess with our blah, blah. So, no. I mean, I know he's not. He's actually, he's an interesting person because he's pro open source, but doesn't care enough about Linux or open source to actually embrace it completely. It's weird. I guess we're just going to move on because I'm just going to be saying more negative things about Epic Games because I don't like them and whatever. But at the same time, awesome work by Lutris for making Epic Game Store work on Linux, because we all know Epic wasn't going to do it themselves. So thank you, fantastic. I look forward to hopefully playing Borderlands 3 through the Epic Game Store if it happens and it's possible on Linux. That'd be great. So instead of ending the show on a sour note, I wanted to end on a great note, and that's why we're going to talk about the new Humble Bundle package for Python by the O'Reilly Company. It's a bunch of tools and books to learn how to program in Python, which is very cool. So they have an intro to Python. They even have something called the Hitchhiker's Guide to Python, as well as 11 more books that you can get. So a total of 13 books for $15 essentially is what the bundle is. And if you are interested, I think that I haven't actually tried all these books, so I don't really know. I can't give you a review of these books, or I can't give you like an assessment of them. However, O'Reilly has been around for a long time, and they do have a lot of good writers on their team. And also, Python is a fantastic language to learn programming. So if you've never programmed before, Python is probably the best language to learn from a beginner, because you have a simple approach by default, and then it can go very powerful as well. So like you can start in a simple way and then you develop into a big powerful system. Then you can move on to other languages if you wanted to, but I do think that Python is the best one to start for a beginner. So this is why I wanted to cover it in the show, because if you are a beginner or you just wanted to learn more about Python, the Humble Book Bundle is a good deal. And also, I'll have a link in the show notes. But just to be clear, the link in the show notes is an affiliate link for the Humble Bundle. So if you do decide to purchase this bundle, please use that link, because it will give a small percentage back to the Tux Digital channel and this podcast, and would help me, continue to create the show and help the channel grow and everything. So, and it would cost nothing extra for you. It's just a nice, commission thing that Humble Bundle does give me for promoting this particular thing to you. So, if you are interested in checking out this Python bundle, please use the link in the show notes below, and I very much appreciate it. So, yeah. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you like what I do here on this show, please like that smash button and be sure to subscribe. If you'd like to support the Tux Digital channel, we have multiple ways to contribute via PayPal, Patreon, sponsors, and many others. You can learn more by going to tuxdigital.com/contribute. Or you can order the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt by going to tuxdigital.com/Linux is Everywhere. Or if you're in Europe, you can go to tuxdigital.com/Linux is Everywhere EU for shipping inside of Europe. I still need to make a smaller URL for that and make a store or something. I will do that as soon as possible. But in the meantime, we also have ways to contribute without any cost to you by using our affiliate links. You can find links for places like Amazon, private internet access, and more by going to tuxdigital.com/affiliates. If you'd like to submit some good news to the show, you can visit the subreddit by going to thisweekinlinux.reddit.com. And if you'd like some more podcasting goodness from me, then check out the latest episode of Destination Linux, as I'm a co-host of that show. And just a reminder, the show is live usually every Saturday, so join us in the live chat room to discuss all the latest Linux news each week, except for this week. I didn't do it live, but next week. Yeah. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tunnell with Tux Digital, and as always, keep using, learning, and enjoying Linux.